Welcome back to Showing Up. We're entering a new season of this show. We think of it as Season 3. And during this season, the format is going to change slightly. We're going to be responding to a piece of content. Might be a chapter of a book, an article, maybe a video that we watched recently, where someone who's a lot smarter than us will be breaking down a concept or an idea, and we're going to react to it, talk you through it, so to speak, with the central question being something like, how is this helping or not helping me show up as the best version of myself? During these episodes, we're going to invite some regular contributors on, people you've heard from before. For this episode, Jack Burgess is joining us again. You may remember him from our two-part series on non-dualistic thinking. We're also in the middle of the COVID-19 outbreak, and we're sheltering in place, practicing social distancing. And as a result of that, we're not able to be in our studio with our higher quality gear. And to make matters worse, Jeremy experienced a house fire and lost his computers and some of his recording equipment. And so we're operating under some difficult conditions. As a result of that, our sound quality is not up to par. We're working on computers, some of which aren't even our own, without our microphones. We hope it doesn't get in the way of what I'm very excited to present is episode 1 of season 3, What Robots Can Tell Us About Being Human.
Today what we're going to do is focus on a chapter out of Kevin Kelley's book called The Inevitable, I think it's just Inevitable. He wrote this just a couple years ago, and I read it when it first came out and was impressed with a number of the concepts he lays out in it. Kevin Kelley, I guess we'll start there, is the co-founder of Wired Magazine and remained its editor for, I think, 30 years or so. And Wired Magazine has been an important tool for reporting what's been going on in the new economy on the internet ever since the early 80s. In that position, he has developed all sorts of relationships and understandings about technological changes going on in our world, and then uses that 30 years of experience to write about what he thinks are going to be the inevitable forces that drive change in the future. He doesn't make predictions about how that's all going to play out. He talks about it more, I think he uses a metaphor more like you can tell where the freeways are going to be built, but not necessarily where all the off-ramps are or what all the services that are going to be on the freeways. But there's a certain amount of inevitability of locations of freeways when we were building those back in the 50s, just because of topography and natural forces in the world. And so he's trying to talk about those. And in the book, he breaks out 12 different ideas, one of which we're going to focus on today. It's chapter 2, and he calls it Cognify. And in it, he's talking about the influence of artificial intelligence and then ultimately robots, which he says are going to be the place we're going to locate the artificial intelligence that most of us are going to encounter in the next 10 years. And he talks about the impact of AI on work and what it's going to be, what it's going to be for, how it's going to be used. And I would say he has a fairly hopeful vision for the future of AI. He talks about how at the very beginning he says the computer age really started when the telephone and the computer got merged, and that created networks and networks of networks. And so we started to build this thing that could function using algorithm faster than we could, better than we could. And then he says this idea that I thought was super interesting, where he says there's really nothing more amazing than making something just a little bit smarter. And if you can take an inert object and add just a little bit of intelligence to it, whether it's a process or a machine, it makes it infinitely more useful. He then goes on to talk about how AIs are already with us. They're already functioning. We've had them for a long time. And to a large degree, we don't really even recognize them because they're just ubiquitous in our world at this point. So we're already living in a world full of AIs. And he doesn't see AI as he doesn't see it as the way like the HAL 9000 function, where it's a general purpose kind of human style thinking or possibly even what you would call consciousness. Another author just says we've made a ton of progress in understanding what intelligence is, but almost no progress in understanding consciousness. And Kevin Kelley makes that same distinction, suggesting that we're learning all kinds of things about what intelligence is, and that it's probably going to be delivered to us kind of at an industrial level, not at a self-reflective level. A lot of times when talking about artificial intelligence, you get these kind of Terminator views of robots that take over the world, but Kelley's not offering that vision of the future. In fact, I think what he's offering is, or what he talks about is how intelligences, or these artificial intelligence, are going to get increasingly specific and be incredibly good at doing one thing, but not very good at doing anything else. He said one of his examples is, he talks about a self-driving car. So the reason a self-driving car is going to be better than a car driven by a human from a safety perspective is because the car is only going to be good at driving and not worrying about the fight it had with its spouse that morning, or things like that. Or medical diagnostic intelligence is only going to be thinking about the medical problem in front of it, not necessarily whether it should have gotten a physics degree in college, or those sort of things that humans do. And there's ways in which we actually get our thinking really, really jumbled up. So he has this vision of artificial intelligence that is, I would say, pretty hopeful, and he sees it as being a very, very disruptive force over the course of the next 30 years. He says all kinds of industries are going to get toppled, all kinds of jobs are going to go away. He equates it to the shifts that took place about 200 years ago in the Industrial Revolution, where prior to that, 70% of all humans worked on farms, and today only 1% do. And so over the course of a couple generations, we lost all those jobs, but we created whole new ones. And while there will be winners and losers, and it won't always be easy, he thinks that's the same process we're going to go through. And so then, just sort of bring up the introduction to a close, I guess, he ends with 4 different categories of jobs as he's thinking about robots and robots taking over work. He says there are jobs that humans can do, but robots can do even better. There are jobs that humans can't do, but robots can do. There are jobs we didn't know that we even wanted done, but we do now. That was one of my favorite examples. He talks about removing a tumor from our gut through our navel. Like 150 years ago, nobody even knew they wanted that done, but today we actually can do it. And then there are jobs that only humans can do at first. Maybe that's good enough to get us started. How'd I do, guys? Did that kind of cover it?
I think that's a great teaser, and I think it's wet the whistles of those who have whistles to be wet to dive farther into this. But that gives, I think, a great springboard for us to jump into this. So there's general idea, and I guess we can. I would imagine we start off where. I mean, this idea of AI probably isn't new to us. I mean, as far as conversating around it. Where do we each intersect this idea currently, as far as where it exists in our thoughts and our actual life, and how does it affect us right now?
Yeah, I would say on the surface, I'm like most people. I don't even actually recognize the ways that it's already influencing my life. I think when it comes on my radar, I've had 2 experiences. One is that one of my brother-in-laws is a quantitative trader. And so for him,
Traitor or trader?
Trader. He's a quantitative trader. Trader, yes. Okay. So in a sense, he's been playing with this like for 15 or 16 years. He creates these quantitative models that he turns loose on the market that trade way faster than any human could trade. And just like you do with any type of trading, you do your best to backcast and forward model, but you can't know what's going to happen when you turn the model loose. So he's also he was a philosophy major in college. So like this with him, it's a great conversation. So I talked to him a lot about it because I'm curious in his world, how it applies to the markets. And obviously, candidate Sanders wanted to make a lot of that stuff illegal. The average Republican and normal moderate Democrat candidate is not going to touch that at all. So it's got political ramifications, it has moral and ethical ramifications, and then it also just has how it impacts our economy is interesting. I facilitated a session that was hosted by the Turing Institute that was asking questions around the role of AI in the development of medicine. So those are like the two open and obvious places where I've had to think about it, but I think most of us don't know where it touches our lives currently for the most part. As a general topic, I'm high on it. I like it. I'm not nervous about it. I think it's gonna take us in two great places. So I think I probably align with the author in the fact that I'm in.
I would say for me, it excites me and terrifies me, probably because my life connects to the technological world, maybe slightly less. There's parts, the robots taking over our lives, visions of that go through my head, as well as, the other thing is, my question is, I'm definitely less aware of you as far as ways that I currently am using AI and the ways it affects my life and stuff. I'm sitting here looking at my phone going, this has now become an appendage to every human, essentially. And I don't know that anyone would acknowledge that is AI, even though I guess it would help to kind of define that artificial intelligence a little bit more. I would assume that it is, our smartphones, and we are already using them, and in fact are pretty dependent upon them. And I both love and hate that at the same time. So I guess my new response, when someone says AI, I have those sort of like futuristic dystopian and utopian movies going through my head where we've kind of like lost all human connection, and we've created a world in which we don't really know what we need anymore, but we have everything done for us, all that stuff, as well as I go, man, I love my phone. So what else can we do? And when you start talking about medical stuff, when you start talking about advancements in particularly the area what Kelley was talking about, doing jobs that no human wants to do, that actually is very interesting to me. So that's my kind of initial garbled response to even just the topic of AI, terrified and excited.
One of the things that stood out to me in reading this chapter is how profoundly I think AI is already impacting our lives, but it didn't turn out the way we thought it was going to turn out. So he makes the case in here that we thought AI was going to sort of mimic human intelligence because we only really understand human intelligence. And so when we started using it, we downgraded it and just started calling it machine learning, as though that's something different. When in fact, I think that is what AI is. It's a machine that can learn as opposed to consciousness. It's not self-reflective. He uses an example of the camera that's in our phones and how in the 70s, to be a photographer, you had to carry huge amounts of film and lots of equipment, primarily lenses that were big and heavy and had all these pieces of glass inside of them that were, I guess, ground in particular ways to do different things, and how all of that is now done by an algorithm in our phone that just the camera, I don't understand it in detail, but basically it's this little tiny thing that captures the data of a picture and then starts to manipulate it based on what it thinks you want and produces photos. But it's all done with an algorithm, which is machine learning.
Huh. Can I ask a question, Kirk? Do you really not understand the difference between a film camera and a digital camera in that way that he's talking about? And it's literally not meant to be judgy.
I understand the difference. I don't understand how it's doing it.
Oh, okay.
I didn't understand the technology behind an analog camera to start with. I don't know how a lens works. You just sort of screw it on and take the picture.
Yeah.
And the same way, I don't understand how the algorithm works. I'm guessing I have a more profound misunderstanding of the algorithm than I did of the lens.
In that example he gave, that was enough to start bringing up all these questions. One of the I think fundamental ones for me is, do we know what better is and what more, even in the photography world, that seems like an easy one where I go, oh, of course, to facilitate one to travel more easily, more fluidly, to be different places, to capture more that's the goal, I suppose, of a photographer, to capture more light of life and to be able to share it. In that sense, yes, it was better. Better, I don't know, better seems to be this word I keep returning to, which I'm guessing is the goal. Better, our lives easier, our lives more efficient, more effective, more. But then I kind of think most things in my life, and I mean, my wife is pregnant with our first kid, and I'm already thinking and looking at other families who I find them pushing back against, very consciously, technology. Be off of your phone. Don't give your kids screens. Spend more time outside in the sun. All these things that I'm not saying they are directly opposed to AI, but they seem kind of in a branch direction that is different, not in the same.
Yeah. If you think about all those statements in the context of raising kids, though, it's managing the technology, not actually eliminating it. It's all
Sure.
those things are given the fact that this technology is so prevalent in our lives. How are we going to choose to interact with it?
Yeah.
The assumption is it's here, it's powerful, we love it. Now we have to figure out what to do with it and what better looks like given its presence.
Yeah.
Very few people are actually Luddites.
Right.
One of my favorite quotes from the introduction was, and I'm not going to quote it quite right, but he says something to the effect, we now have the capacity to innovate and produce technologies faster than we can civilize them.
So I guess I'm sort of feeling myself taking a position in this, not because I'm wanting to actually cement that and call that my position, but this is the way I push against something to kind of quell my fears, I suppose, or to answer questions. I try to play this out in different industries, and I look at, even the food industry and animal agriculture, absolutely kind of. So here's another thing I actually have to ask. What I don't understand. What are we calling technology versus AI, and is there a difference? Or is all technology some sort of AI, or does AI have to have a certain level of learnability to be qualified as AI?
That's a great question. It's the difference between, I think it might be the difference, or how Kelley would say it, it's the difference between a machine and electricity. We electrified the world at one point, and in doing so, we created a bunch of machines that were dependent on the electricity, but the machine wasn't the electricity.
Yeah.
But the machine would have never existed without the electricity. So they're kind of one and the same in a sense.
It makes it even very hard for me to kind of nail down where are we at in the stage of transitioning from, industrialization, technological advance into AI. I think of animal agriculture and our ability to actually mass produce quantities of meat now in ways that technology has allowed us to, essentially grow animals faster and distribute it. And I would say in some ways, I think that has led to the sort of problem of the Western diet, heart attacks and stuff skyrocketing, coronary artery disease and cancer and stuff. I mean, these are all very kind of just cursory views over these things. I'm not even saying this is, but that's where my mind goes to. Have we, when you just said we're creating technology faster than we can even civilize it, I wonder if even like the way we are interacting with animals now, we're going to look back on in 5 to 10, hopefully maybe years and go, oh my gosh, we were just kind of, we weren't, to use, I can't remember, Jack, your or Kirk's words, we created this, now we have to know how to manage it, not necessarily to eliminate it.
Yeah, and I think to me that's where it gets interesting, is because it's this thing that's sort of stretching us beyond the bounds of what we like. Anytime you stretch yourself beyond the bounds of what you can actually accomplish as a person, you're in an area of incredible opportunity as well as an area of incredible danger or risk, right? So like what's intriguing to me about this, like you can make the same discussion about atomic power, right? Like we don't know what to do with power, like electricity. We don't know how to manage electricity any better than we know how to manage our diets. But what's fascinating about this discussion is it's this massive shift that it forces us to ask those old questions, those old sort of philosophical questions, like what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be like, we don't manage meat is not the problem. Meat, like our ability to distribute meat and grow meat faster than we should, that's the issue. So like for me, it's like we're in this area of transition, like where all our problems are being revealed, and they're the problems of our ability to act as humans. And that's kind of what excites me about it. It's like it's this new paradigm shift where like all of our issues as humans are going to be revealed in a new way, and we get a new opportunity to look at them and ask the same questions that have been asked for thousands and thousands of years, just with a new lens. So in part, it's like less about what AI is and can do, and more about how like, because I kind of feel like we've touched on technology, like we're up to our ankles in technology, I would say, but like it's kind of like when they went to space, and then the product that all of us know about from that is Velcro, right? Like that's the least useful of all the things that we got from space exploration, but it's the one that we know about, right? Because we're not scientists and we're not astronauts, but there are many, and that's kind of feel like where we are with technology. We're like at the Velcro level. Like, how much time are you spending on your device? It's the least interesting conversation, but that's kind of where we are, and that's in our stage of development, and that's fine. But so for me, it's like the philosophical questions are interesting, and also like Kirk, like I did in my skimming, I went straight to the things that you had highlighted. So, but I think that idea of transitions, that one also fascinates me too, because there's just so much. I don't know. There's so much transition going on in the world. That's the part that scares me. Is like, are we ready for another one? But again, it's like ready for it. Yeah, I think we are. We're humans. We know how to be. So I think we are ready for it. But that's the one that makes me nervous, is like, can we just not layer on another transition?
That's the part of this chapter that actually lit me up the most. Is he spends quite a bit of time of it sort of building a case for his worldview and laying it out. But it gets really good when he starts to ask the questions you're raising, Jack. And I actually want to read just a little bit of this, where he talks about how as humans we're about to enter an identity crisis. He says, as we invent more species of AI, we will be forced to surrender more of what is supposedly unique about humans. Each step of surrender, we are not the only mind that can play chess, fly a plane, make music, or invent a mathematical law. All of those will be painful and sad to lose. We'll spend the next 3 decades, indeed perhaps the next century, in a permanent identity crisis, continually asking ourselves what humans are good for. If we aren't unique tool makers or artists or moral ethicists, then what, if anything, makes us special? And the grandest irony of all, the greatest benefit of an everyday utilitarian AI will not be increased productivity or an economics of abundance or a new way of doing science, although all of that will happen. The greatest benefit of the arrival of artificial intelligence is that AIs will help define humanity. We need AIs to tell us who we are. And that paragraph, I think, is his central thesis of this chapter. And this is a bit of his positivity or even utopian view. It's that when we give away, when we release all the jobs that robots can do better than us and all the jobs that we could never even do, we will finally be able to discover what we were made for.
So what is the implication there? There's AI eliminates what's in between us and kind of self-realization in a way, in a sense that, are we living out of our lizard brain, which only exists for survival, kind of production, sort of thing. And there is an enlightened self that can exist when we kind of do away with the just sort of minutia of life, of human life as we know it now. Is that?
That's the idea. And he also suggests that that's already happened once, because we've made, through the turning over all kinds of work in the last couple hundred years, even the work of our animals has been turned over to machines in large part. 200 years ago, hardly anybody ever dreamed of being a full-time artist or musician or the work all three of us do wasn't even imaginable 150 years ago. I sit and talk to people all day about ideas and concepts and relationships and my gosh, 150 years ago, it's like, go chop firewood or you die.
Right.
And he's suggesting that is about to speed up and happen all over again. But now it's this idea of truly discovering what it means to be human. I'm intoxicated by that idea and also recognize the utopian nature of it, and makes me nervous that I'm missing something. Like food production, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're killing ourselves at the same time, and environmental problems and all of that.
Yeah. But at the same time, also solving in greater degrees problems of hunger and disease and starvation. I mean, slowly, there's still, obviously, we have miles to go before we sleep, but I mean, it's not all bad. I don't mean that. So there's something beautiful about it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the central question. Like, if my job were to be replaced, right? So there's no like, whatever skill set I have where I could scramble around and cobble together a job. If that were to be replaced, then my ability to earn a living would be replaced. And therefore, my worth in the world would be replaced. So what am I left with? I'm left with having to figure out who I am as a human, minus the things that I've always used to define my worth. And that's freaking fascinating. Yeah, like it's like, and I think about that, like, so who it returns me to childhood. Like I get to, so in the positive and the negative, I don't have to work. I therefore am, my ability to provide for myself is gone. So someone else is providing for me. And all that's left to do for me is to just play. Like, I'm a child again, aren't I? Essentially?
I think that's exactly right. But if you think about what a child is doing at the beginning of their life, they're playing at things like, and it's teaching them how to walk, how to talk, how to socialize, how to interact. There's a ton of work going on in those first 5 years of just play, right?
Yeah.
And so I think
that's what I mean.
Introducing is the idea that the very nature of work is being transformed, or how value is created is being transformed.
And I think that's what's exciting for me, is like, but I'm not a child. So what would I play at? I would play at how to be more human. I think I would play at how to be better connected to the things that are like me, i.e. other humans. That's what I would play. I would play at one, what I want to do versus what I'm forced to do. I would play at being better connected to other humans. I don't know. I think I would play at all the same questions that philosophy has always asked us.
Yeah.
But it's grown up play. Like, what's grown up play look like? That sounds fun to me.
Yeah. Well, it kind of forces the question, what would you do if money weren't an issue, in a way? I mean, that old question, just to get at the heart of, what do you do when your value and your motivation isn't connected to the kind of ladder of, power and money and like provision, that kind of thing? What do you do? And also the other thing is, I remember even when I was a kid, work in a way actually I think is a blessing. And I don't know if we can ever eliminate that, like to see our hands create something, and for necessity, not only purely out of just kind of enjoyment. I think there is a real innate value as humans to see something created that has necessity, that we can work with our hands, or, whatever extension of our hands. But I even think about the way I played, or the way I worked as a kid. I would make some game out of something, or I involve people more, or I was less burdened with the productivity of it purely, but ironically probably ended up being more productive in certain ways when I could turn it into something that I was invested in as far as enjoyment or relationship. And to me, that's kind of what the adult kid play kind of connection looks like, when it's not just this oppressive sort of like higher, like produce more, climb the ladder, like that kind of thing. which I think is also really a really beautiful kind of thing to be confronted with. Yeah, what if it wasn't all about like my productivity? What is, I guess the question behind this for me is, I would love to hear you guys answer, what does it mean to be human?
Yeah, that's the core. Yeah, that's where it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human?
As you have now guessed, we aren't going to answer that question. It's an old question. It's old enough that it might be the basis of self-reflection, the Great Awakening. What does it mean to be human?
I'm working on a research project right now about intrinsic motivation. The starting point of it is the work that we are doing today is increasingly complex, requires creativity and innovation. And when that's true, the vast majority of the motivation set it takes to accomplish work like that is intrinsic, not external or extrinsic. And cash is an external motivator. And so when you present cash, what would you do for money? That question. When you present cash as a motivation to accomplish projects that are complex, require creativity and innovation, you get worse results. It actually has a negative impact on the releasing of the human capacity. And that idea is new. We only started working on this in the last half of the last century. It's 40 or 50 years old we've actually been talking about this, and only about 30 years that we've even understood it, if we even understand it at all. And so I think we have 6,000 years of history of only being motivated externally, and we're only just beginning to understand what it is to do work from an intrinsic place, at the same time that the kind of work that we're doing requires that, which again is just a fascinating idea.
Well, I mean, I think that was one of my struggles as a teacher, right? Is like I taught high school for 8 years, and so the thing is, like you kind of latch onto the idea of extrinsic motivation, but then you realize pretty quickly that your classroom, there's a set of kids who are highly motivated by the pressures of their family and the desire to get into college. That's extrinsic, right? And then there are other kids that aren't motivated at all, right? So you have to figure out how to motivate them, and education has almost always defaulted to motivating them with a test score or a pass or fail, and that's because it's super hard to create an individualized plan for every child in the classroom in which you reveal the true nature of who that person is and what they love, and then figure out how to apply that to that topic. It's ridiculous, the notion that we would teach from the idea, but it's also what we know is true about how we learn. Like people learn things naturally when they're interested. But yeah, I think that the idea of like everything being stripped away. So I think, Kirk, if I'm taking it in the wrong direction, so basically you're saying like if everything's stripped away, all of our motivation, if we're free to be, then our motivations are more likely to be intrinsic versus extrinsic.
Subject to corruption, or the parts of human nature that are yet to be aligned with that. I mean, it's you can get very Rousseauian very quickly with this and just assume that everyone is good. when you get into the how do you create an environment where intrinsic motivation emerges, there are things that are put in place that are more likely to create that than others, some of which well, that's a whole different subject, but you don't necessarily, you can't force that. It emerges or it doesn't. You can just increase the likelihood of it. What's interesting about this shift is, well, in the conclusion, to bring back to Kelley, he says, many of the jobs that politicians are fighting to keep away from robots are jobs that no one wakes up in the morning and really wants to do. That idea. If that definition of work, things that are simple and routine, are increasingly handed over to intelligences that are happy to do it, designed for it, I think something emerges. I think the human is going to want to self-actualize, put it in Maslow's terms. That's a natural progression. It's not a luxury. It's not from Maslow's frame of reference, he calls that a need. It's a drive that we have. And I think that's what people are going to want to do. That's what we're going to want to go play at. And I think it's going to be mostly pretty awesome.
There's some part of me that thinks that at some point on the bell curve of technology and AI, we reach a point where we have a sort of crisis of meaninglessness, or not, like we're not sure how to handle even like the level of freedom, or what, I don't even know if it is freedom, but whatever we've achieved, I almost just imagine this world where it's like, I'm going to go for fun, to play. I'm going to go harvest my food. I'm going to go like work the ground and like work in my garden, even though we have plants, not the green plants, but plants, industrial plants that create more than enough food for the entire world's population, because it's all automated and there's perfect efficiency in harvesting and this and that. But there's something in me that's going to go, I need to go work on I need to be connected to the earth more. Not to say that you can't, I'm assuming, but I almost see like this complete, like full circle. Then it's like what I need actually, once everything is taken care of, I don't need money. I don't need food. I want to be like, I imagine us like living in little communes, actually doing what we did probably like 100 years ago to like survive in a way.
But the difference being, to Kirk's point, it's now because we want to. Before it was because we had to, and then it got to the point where we didn't have to, but then we had to figure out how to support the system that made it that way. But then in the future, it seems like the cycle was like, now we're doing that's, and maybe that's, you were leading us to the thing, but like, that's what it means to be human, to do those things out of a desire to do them.
Right. I guess it just goes back to the whole kind of Dan Gilbert TED talk. The science of happiness is, the meaninglessness thing is greatly connected to what I think we mischaracterize as happiness. We don't actually know how to choose what makes us happy. And I think I know I'm pretty bad at, when I do have the freedom to choose if I have to do something out of necessity or just pure desire, I actually find way more fulfillment when there's actually a need base connected to it. Because I mean, it's the same thing with what's happening now with phones. It's like, now we're trying to manage our amount of phone interaction or like screen time. I'm not even to get into it, but who knows, links between all the, autism stuff and like children at super young ages and this and that. We're trying to manage that. Whereas that's purely on a want base now. It's not a need.
I think for me, there's been a clear, so it gets back to the thing that comes to the surface every time I think about this is the question that Jeremy posed. It's like, what does it mean to be human? And those are the old questions of philosophy, metaphysics, ontology, epistemology, anthropology. Those are not new questions, right? Those are the oldest question, and then it lands on ethics. Like it always it lands on ethics. How will we behave? And so for me, the way it shows up in my world is like, the more I get a peek into what pieces of my life will be replaced, the more I think about how I want to replace them. And it's back to like, so my friend Kenneth, who is a partner at PwC, like he we had a really great discussion, and his point was like, look, he's like, more and more and more, I realized the most important class I took in college was acting. And he's like, it's not statistics, it's not computer science, it's none of those things. It's that I learned in acting class how to be more human, how to stand at the front of the room and show my emotions, but also elicit emotion. So like that's like for me. So the way it shows up in my life is like I can kind of see how certain parts of my work are already going to be replaced. So now I'm thinking about, well, what does that mean for me? And the answer is always more human, more human. And that's just like a hilarious thing for a human to say, I think. I just think it makes me giggle. How can I be more human? It's almost like a dumb question, but I don't think animals are asking that question, and I don't think technology is asking. Animals aren't asking how can I be more animal, and technology is not asking how can I be more technological. But humans can ask the question, and that won't ever go away. So yeah, how do I be more human? And that's like, kind of that's an old question. And I don't, and the funny thing is I don't find myself particularly good at being human.
Which makes you a really effective human.
Yeah. So like, great. Exactly. Yeah. Totally. Like strip away the stupid stuff. Like it's funny that, I mean, all these questions that we are capable of asking are the questions. Like they're the best questions.
Kirk, what would you, in response to your question that you just asked Jack, what he was talking about, brought up another question for me, which is, what would you say is not being human?
Man, I don't think I have an actual answer to that, because I don't think I'm good at answering what is human. I mean, it's interesting that just my experience of being me is my only context for that. I think one of the things that I'm struck by in this conversation and how my career path and what I've chosen to put my hand to kind of shape my thinking, but I don't think humans. I think he raises this. Kelley raises this in this chapter, or I read it somewhere else. But it really struck me that humans aren't actually good at being efficient. We don't systematize things very well, and every chance we get to turn the pursuit of efficiency over to a machine or now an AI proves to us that they're just way better at it, which means in some way we are the opposite of efficient. I don't know if that's right, but somewhere somebody made the reference to how inefficient science is as a pursuit. Science doesn't seek efficiency. It's asks questions and makes up experiments, most of which are wrong and prove nothing, and occasionally we get something right. But how absolutely powerful that process is and has transformed our world. I'm trying to give up the pursuit of efficiency, which also to me is the pursuit of that ties to control. I'm increasingly seeing control as almost always the wrong impulse, but nearly always my first impulse. And somehow that's what being efficient or being in control might be what being a bad human is.
Ooh, I like that. You really pulled out. I was afraid where you were going in that for a bit, and you really pulled one out of there. Efficient and in control, being a bad human. I love that.
Well, why don't you flip it to the positive? So being human means being inefficient and not in control.
It's not in control. That doesn't mean no limits.
Don't say if it's good or bad. Don't say if it's good or bad. Just say it. Just say it first.
Sorry. So it means losing control in every way that I can.
What does Richard Rohr say about that? You're not in control.
Yeah, he says that's just joining. He also says that That's that's his definition of suffering.
So you're getting closer to the truth. You are not in control. So any
Correct.
moment that you recognize that, you're getting closer to truth. I think that sounds great.
I think that's right. The opposite of efficient isn't necessarily inefficient, but I do think it's something like creative. We think of people who are creative in a way that is really special and unique. And that's true. There are people like that. They just have this thing that is unimaginable, and yet they produce work with it. But I actually think that the being creative is an innate part of being human, and that when you free people, they become that's one of the things that is revealed, their creativity, and it shows up in all sorts of natural ways that are there's a creativity involved
Yeah.
that I think is necessary.
You would have to make a hard case for me to believe that efficiency is important. Like, I've never once thought in my life, like, that dude is so efficient. I really like that guy. It's just like I don't think it's important. Now, it may be important, like, in computer world, but in human world, I don't know. It's like, I just don't, I'm not sure that efficiency is all that important. Maybe it is.
It's a major pursuit of an organization. The capacity to make something repeatable lowers cost dramatically.
But I mean, that's the Steve Martin joke. He's like, he jokes about, like, I can't think of anything better for a person than to come out every night and do the same thing over and over and over again. Like, that's the joke. It's not. No one wants to repeat themselves every single day. Like, so this back to, like, I'm pushing into it because it's fun. Like, I want to say let's assume being human is more important than being a corporate. It's just like, oh, what does that mean? I actually want to embrace inefficient, maybe for a heartbeat, being like, is it okay to be? Because I am. Maybe that's why I like this conversation. I'm incredibly inefficient. Yeah.
What AI and machines are allowing us to do is turn over the work of efficiency to an intelligence that is actually capable of it and loves it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so what you just said, Jack, is what has been going through my mind this whole time, and it's what Jiro, the famous sushi artist, Jiro Dream of Sushi.
Yeah.
He says at 80 something years old, he goes, I am so fortunate to have been able to do what I've done for 70 years. He was 82 and started making sushi when he was 12. He goes to 6 days a week, does the exact same thing. And part of me goes, maybe it has nothing to do with what you do, but your state of mind as far as what is gratitude? What is life? Because honestly, I heard that and everything inside me just went, yeah, like doing the same thing every day for 70, like that almost makes me so depressed. If I could see my end from the beginning and just go, this is what it is, Jeremy, just get used to it, but then when I hear it, something in me goes, oh my God, I don't necessarily want that, but I want to be there. Mm-hmm. I want to be there. And there is a place where you're like, I'm grateful. I don't know if it's just I'm grateful or if it's more than that, but there's something he's figured out that I definitely have not in that.
And it might get to the complexity of human beings, like, because I have the same reaction. That's why I was a failed teacher. I can't repeat myself. Like, I could care less about repeating myself. So that's a bad attribute in a teacher. Like, you need to have a repeatable process or else you run yourself into the ground. But, like, again, what does it mean to be human? It's like, yeah, that dude loves doing the same thing every day. I just watched The Chef's Table, same thing. This guy that makes gelato, and he's been making gelato like his whole life. And I'm like, dude, seriously, make a hamburger, don't make anything. But he was so content. He was so unbelievably content making gelato every day. But not me. So like that's back to like, so that trying to fill in what that might mean for being human is like, we're pretty diverse set of people. Yeah.
I guess the question is, what's your gelato or your sushi?
Well, I like them both. If I can, and I like that those guys make them for me. I don't know. Yeah. It's an interesting. But Kirk, I love I think you took us in a really good direction.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, I also think like something you said earlier really stuck with me is like, I'm going to misquote you, but you were talking about like the sense of meaning and purpose you get from doing something valuable. Like, I don't think that would go away. And I think that's what's exciting is like, if we removed if we could just, I think you would find, that's who we are. Like you would find new value. Like if we pulled the rug out from under your value today, in a month, you would be in a spot of new value because that's who you are. That's intriguing to me. Like, what would that look like? Like nobody wants their house burned down, you know, but then it happens and you adjust.
That's true. And I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I can even see the, like, this may be an ultimate phrase, Kirk, but like, not like the greatest thing that ever happened, but one of the great gifts of life are some of those things you're like, are the things we try so hard to protect against: fire insurance, fireproofing our roofs, and all this stuff. It's like, well, it happened, and oh my gosh, this has opened up a new world of life that I wasn't experiencing in certain ways. So I totally agree.
I have a diagram that I unpack for people. Nobody's buying this. It's a workshop, actually, that nobody buys. Nobody wants it because it's titled "Life is Meaningless," but the good news is it's full of suffering.
That's awesome.
Part of it is that the suffering is the experience of the loss of control and the breaking of meaning that drives you deeper than meaning, so that you can come out of that place having developed and understand your participation in the creation of meaning. Not that it's yours alone, but that you participate. And when meaning breaks, the meaning you were handed by your culture, your parents, your religion, when that breaks and you lose control and you can rebuild from there, I think that allows you to experience being human in a way that is profound. But nobody signs up for suffering.
I think we'll have to do a part 2 to this, but a question that just came up to me is AI, one of AI's primary goals, to eliminate suffering?
Well, that's a question we're going to have to wait to wrestle with on part 2 of What Can Robots Tell Us About Being Human?
Du denkst wirklich, du bist wichtig, wirklich wichtiger als ich. Denkst du wirklich, du bist wichtig? Vielleicht doch, vielleicht auch nicht. Superstar, doch weißt du noch, wie es früher war? Jetzt bist du ein Superstar, doch weißt du noch, wie es früher war? Du denkst wirklich, du bist wichtig, wirklich wichtiger als ich. Denkst du wirklich, du bist wichtig? Vielleicht doch, vielleicht auch nicht. Du sagst, deine Fans, die sind teuer. Warum bekommst du bei mir dann Paranoia? Ich hab doch nur einmal Nacht bei dir abgestaubt. Und du sagst, ich hätte nicht deine intimste Raum, mein Fehler. Du denkst wirklich, du bist wichtig, wirklich wichtiger als ich. wirklich, du es richtig. Vielleicht doch, vielleicht auch nicht. Leg los! Doch weißt du noch, wie's früher war? Jetzt bist du ein Superstar. Doch weißt du noch, wie früher war? Du denkst wirklich, du bist richtig. Wirklich wichtiger als ich. Denkst du wirklich, du bist richtig? Vielleicht auch nicht. Da werde ich du da in der Ecke! Du glaubst, du wärst wichtig! Denkst du wirklich, du wärst wichtig? Vielleicht auch nicht! Du denkst wirklich, du bist wichtig! Wirklich wichtiger als ich! Denkst du wirklich, du bist wichtig?